Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be back.
Today, we're going to take a look at this video you sent me, 1,000 Times Future Clif High Explorer's Guide to Sci-Fi World.
Right.
And this is from the channel Clif High World. So
Yeah.
basically, we're going to just dive in and try and extract what we can in terms of predictions and perspective.
Okay.
As always, we want to make it very clear to listeners that we are not endorsing anything that's said in this video or any other source material.
Right.
This is purely for informational and entertainment purposes.
Right.
So just to reiterate, we are not endorsing any of the opinions or ideas
Absolutely.
that are expressed in the video. So
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, the aim here is to understand what's being said
right.
and explore the potential implications of those ideas.
Exactly.
And to really look at how these predictions might play out.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think a good place to start is this whole JFK files release.
Okay.
The speaker in the video seemed kind of disappointed.
Yes, he did. He had a very strong reaction, actually.
Yeah.
Not necessarily because of any major bombshells that came out,
Right.
but because of the nature of the documents.
Right. And what they represent.
Yeah, it's like he almost expected it.
Yeah.
He wasn't surprised,
right.
in a way.
Yeah, he dismissed a lot of it as filler material and then went so far as to suggest that a good portion of the documents might be fraudulent.
Right, and he suggests that the paperwork was basically created to justify CIA agent recruitment and bribery schemes.
Oh, wow.
So from back then, and he even uses this term meme,
Huh.
and he's talking about how station chiefs would inflate the number of agents they had to access more funds.
Wow.
Even inventing people.
Wow. That's a pretty big accusation to make.
It is.
Does he provide any specific evidence for this claim?
He doesn't actually offer specific documents or examples from the recent release.
Okay.
It's presented more as his interpretation of the situation.
Right.
And a reflection of what he believes was common practice
Interesting.
at the time.
Yeah, and he kind of sees this as part of a bigger picture.
Absolutely. He connects it to his broader thesis about hidden financial activities within government agencies.
Right.
The implication is that these earlier methods were like a precursor
Right.
to more sophisticated off-the-books financial operations that he believes are happening now.
Right, which brings us to this concept of magic money computers.
Yeah, what an interesting term.
Yeah, what are those?
So he's referring to the alleged discovery of 14 magic money computers that are generating funds without any legitimate backing.
Wow.
It's a very evocative term.
It is.
To describe what he believes are essentially off-the-books sources of wealth creation.
So they're just making money out of thin air.
That's what he's suggesting.
Okay, and he mentions the Doge Fellows in connection with this.
Yes, it's quite clear he's talking about people involved with Dogecoin.
Right.
And potentially Elon Musk, given the recent discussions about cryptocurrency and hidden finances.
So are they the ones that discovered these?
He suggests that they may have stumbled upon some of these magic money computers.
Okay.
But they've only scratched the surface.
Oh, there's more.
He believes that the 14 computers they might have found are nothing compared to the financial operations tied to black projects.
So black budget type stuff.
Exactly. And the secret space program.
Wow, so all that money we hear about, trillions of dollars.
He's saying that's just a fraction of it.
Wow, and he thinks it's going to take a while longer to uncover these black project computers. Why is that?
He thinks it's because of fear.
Okay.
He predicts that once the true scale of these funds is realized,
Right.
particularly in connection with these highly sensitive projects, there's going to be huge apprehension about releasing that information because of the potential economic fallout.
Right, because if everyone knows that the government's just printing money out of thin air, then the whole system collapses.
That's his thinking.
Wow, and he even gives us a potential timeline, he says, around June 2025.
Yeah, that's when he thinks this information might start to emerge.
Interesting. And of course, this all ties into his view that confidence in the U.S. dollar is going to decline.
Absolutely. That's his core argument.
Okay.
He believes that the current economic vulnerabilities, combined with these future revelations about concealed funds,
Right.
are going to erode public and international confidence in the dollar.
And he uses the example of border regions in Mexico refusing to accept U.S. dollars.
Right. He presents it as an early symptom,
Okay.
a sign of growing unease with the dollar
Right.
in those regions.
So is this a widespread thing or just an isolated incident?
He doesn't go into the scale of it,
Okay.
but he uses it as a concrete example
Okay.
to support his broader point about diminishing trust.
Right. And he's very firm in his belief that once that confidence is lost, it can't be easily regained.
He sees it as a psychological threshold.
Right.
Once people start doubting the value and stability of a currency,
Uh-huh.
that doubt can spread very quickly and become self-reinforcing,
Interesting.
making it almost impossible to rebuild that lost faith.
Okay, so we have these hidden financial activities potentially being reveals, leading to a loss of confidence in the dollar.
Right.
He also gives his take on why certain information, like the full details on the JFK assassination and the Epstein files, are still being kept a secret.
Yes, he has a very specific and controversial explanation for the JFK files.
Okay.
He suggests that the complete release of authentic information would point to Israel and Jewish individuals or groups as being heavily involved in the deep state
Okay.
and the intelligence operations related to the assassination.
Right.
And he believes that this is the main reason why the files haven't been fully declassified.
Okay, and what about the Epstein files?
He claims that the information in the Epstein files is far more damaging than what is generally known.
Okay.
And he talks about things like adrenochrome harvesting and blackmailing of high-profile politicians.
Wow.
He believes these revelations would be so explosive
Yeah.
that they'll be permanently suppressed.
So again, to be clear to the listener, these are all just claims and interpretations that the speaker is making.
Exactly.
We're just presenting his perspective without validating it.
We are simply conveying his viewpoint as expressed in the video.
Right, exactly. And this leads into a significant part of his commentary where he shares his views on the Jewish population and their influence globally.
And again, I have to reiterate that we're simply reporting what he says in the video.
Of course.
He alleged that Jewish people globally are orchestrating mass migration as a deliberate strategy to undermine Western civilizations.
And he doesn't have a very positive opinion of their intellectual and creative contributions, particularly in the realm of science.
Yeah, he essentially downplays their prominence in academia, saying it's not due to any inherent intellectual superiority, but rather to plots and suppression of non-Jewish ideas.
Wow, again, very strong opinions there.
Yes, and again, we're just relaying what he's saying in the video.
Of course, now he also takes aim at Catherine Austin Fitts and her work with the Solari Report.
He claims that she doesn't recognize the intentional and manipulative nature of the problems we're facing.
Okay.
And he thinks she attributes these issues to organic processes,
Right.
while he sees it as a deliberate, controlled implosion.
And who does he say is behind this implosion?
He specifically points to Jewish individuals and groups.
Interesting.
And he says this strategy has been in place since before the Federal Reserve.
Wow, and what about her understanding of cryptocurrency? He seems to have a problem with that too.
Yes, he claims that because she lacks coding knowledge,
Okay.
her analysis and conclusions about crypto are flawed.
So he thinks you need to be a coder to understand crypto.
That's his position.
Okay, fair enough. So with all these opinions and ideas forming his foundation, he then goes on to outline some pretty significant shifts he sees coming to the financial landscape.
Yes, his main prediction is that smart money will move out of banks and the U.S. dollar.
As we approach this major decline in the dollar's value.
Exactly, and they'll seek safety in tangible assets.
And he specifically lists silver, gold, certain types of real estate like hotels and farms, and particular cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Monero.
He sees silver and gold as safe haven assets that hold their value in uncertain times.
Right.
And he thinks hotels and farms represent tangible income-generating real estate that can withstand economic turmoil.
And Bitcoin and Monero.
He views them as decentralized alternatives to fiat currencies, with Monero being favored for its privacy features.
And he predicts some pretty big price increases for gold and Bitcoin.
Yeah, he thinks Bitcoin could go anywhere from $250,000 to $2.5 million.
Wow.
And gold could hit $50,000 depending on just how much the U.S. dollar is revealed to be unbacked.
Okay, and what about stable coins like Tether?
He believes they're in trouble.
Because
if the U.S. dollar collapses,
right.
then the stablecoins tied to it will also lose their value.
Interesting. So he's basically saying that anything pegged to the dollar is going down with the ship.
Pretty much.
Okay, now he also talks about hyperinflation, but he has a specific way of defining it.
Yeah, he separates hyperinflation as a psychological response where people panic and spend their devaluing currency quickly from the actual collapse of the currency's intrinsic value.
Okay, and he thinks we might see this psychological response with the U.S. dollar.
Yes, as it loses value.
Right, and then he introduces this concept of rebalancing.
Yes, a complete inversion of our current pricing system.
So instead of prices going up in dollars.
He thinks things will be priced in fractions of stable assets like gold and silver.
So you're saying, like, instead of a gallon of milk costing $5?
It might cost a fraction of a silver coin.
Wow, that's a pretty radical shift.
It is.
And then he proposes a potential return to a different kind of dollar, not a central bank digital currency.
No, he's against those.
Right.
He calls it a constitutional dollar.
Okay. And what would that look like?
He doesn't go into specifics, but it seems like he's talking about a currency backed by something tangible, like gold or silver.
Right.
And operating outside the control of a central bank.
So a return to the gold standard, essentially.
In a way, yes.
Interesting. So with all this talk about economic upheaval, it's not surprising that he also predicts social unrest and even violence.
He sees significant social instability coming as these economic and political issues play out.
Okay.
He specifically mentions potential violence against Jewish people in Europe,
Oh, wow.
particularly in Ireland and Britain.
And why does he think that will happen?
He connects it to anger over mass migration, which he again attributes to Jewish influence.
Okay, and he fears a breakdown of social order in the U.S. if these problems aren't addressed.
Yes, and he suggests a pretty big change to our legal system.
What's that?
He advocates for a return to common law courts,
Okay.
which he sees as a way to bypass the current system that he believes is controlled by Jewish interests.
Right, and now for something completely different, he predicts the disclosure of space alien technology.
Yes, a rather unexpected turn.
What does he say about it?
He predicts that information about space aliens, reverse-engineered technology, and zero-point energy will be disclosed this summer.
And he uses the term violently,
Yes, he thinks it will be sudden and disruptive revelation.
not a gradual release.
No, he thinks it will be more like a dam breaking,
Okay.
possibly triggered by other countries revealing what their intelligence agencies know about the Mossad and the CIA.
Interesting. And he also shares his personal perspective and the actions he's taken based on all these predictions.
He says he's been warning people about this for years.
Okay.
And he mentions that some of his Jewish friends are taking his warnings seriously.
So they're preparing.
One reportedly moved to Brazil and got rid of all his U.S. dollar assets.
Wow.
And he reiterates his distinction between individual Jewish people and what he calls Judaism and the Pharisees.
Okay.
But his overall views on Jewish influence remain very critical.
Yes, we've established that.
And finally, he has this kind of implied call to action for his listeners
Which is
to move their wealth out of U.S. dollars and into tangible assets.
as a way to protect themselves from what's coming.
Exactly.
Okay, so to recap, we covered his disappointment with the JFK files, his claims about hidden magic money computers, his expectation of a loss of confidence in the U.S. dollar, and his reasons for why certain information is still secret.
We also discussed his very critical views on Jewish people and their influence. His disagreement with Catherine Austin fits his predictions about financial shifts toward tangible assets and specific cryptocurrencies, his take on hyperinflation and economic rebalancing, his idea of a constitutional dollar, and his concerns about social unrest.
And, of course, his prediction about the disclosure of space alien technology, his personal stance, and his advice to get out of the U.S. dollar.
It's certainly a wide-ranging and dramatic set of ideas.
It is.
And this deep dive leaves us with a question for you, the listener.
Okay.
What are the implications of a major shift away from traditional financial systems and the forces that are driving these changes?
That's a great question.
We encourage you to think critically about everything we've discussed
Absolutely.
and to keep exploring these complex and often debated topics.
Thanks for joining us today.
And we'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.
Bye.